5 dangerous faults which may affect a general. Number 1, recklessness, which leads to destruction. Cowardice, which leads to capture. A hasty temper, which can be provoked by insults. A delicacy of honor, which is sensitive to shame. So these are applicable in business, when dealing with people, relationships, and so forth. How many times do we act inappropriately or fail to act as a result of this? You can use these as a checklist, actually, to understand your actions or lack thereof. The art of war teaches us not to rely on the likelihood of the enemy's not coming, but on our own readiness to receive him, not on the chance of his not attacking, but rather on the fact that we have made our position unassailable. So essentially what this means is that you've always got to be prepared. You've always got to be as efficient with what you do, how you work with your team, your learning, your studying, and essentially your ability to think logically and critically, as well as being present to the moment, understanding the forces and dynamics in play, and essentially just educating yourself through real life action taking and the results you get based on the actions you take from the environment and your competitors and so forth. And not leaving things up to chance, and not being slack on the areas that you need to improve on. If you see weaknesses, go to work and improve those weaknesses, improve them right away. Prioritize and focus on the ones that produce the greatest output, or the ones that have your greatest weaknesses that can be exploited. Focus on those first, but make sure you address everything with time, and try to do it as fast as you can, because if you are ready, you don't have to get ready when the enemy shows up. When the enemy shows up, they'll see how strong you are and they'll turn around and go away, because a lot of times they're looking to fight you where you're weak. If they know you can win, on the flip side, I mentioned this earlier, you don't fight battles where you know you're going to lose. If they know that they're going to lose, they're not going to fight you. And thus, your preparation, your discipline, and everything will prevent a lot of attacks that would have possibly come to you as a result, I should say, of all the preparation and proactiveness that you've taken in everything you do. Because I believe how you do one thing is how you do everything. The army on the march. If in training soldiers, commands are habitually enforced, the army will be well disciplined. If not, its discipline will be bad. Consistency with your people is very important. If you put a process in place, until you actually say the process is going to end, you have to be consistent with it. Because if you're not consistent with it, they're not going to have any respect for you. They're going to say that, then this is a weak area, this person has a weak area, and they have probably way more weak areas, and I don't see that person as a leader. A leader goes for first and enforces certain commands and habits and puts systems and processes in place to make sure it's consistent as much as possible. The more there is consistency, the more respect there is. But if there is slack, the respect will be lost. And the army will follow suit. They'll think it's okay to not have self-discipline, and the processes that they deploy don't matter either for the people that they deploy them to, and it's going to be a chain of chaos, and not the type of chaos that I mentioned earlier that grows you, but a chaos that essentially will bring your organization down. If a general shows confidence in his men, but always insists on his orders being obeyed, the gain will be mutual. So again, having confidence in people is trusting. But that doesn't mean you don't have reports and processes in place that keeps your finger on the pulse, so you can understand what's going on, and then based on what's going on, you make decisions. So your orders essentially are being obeyed, but they're not doing it in a way where it makes the person feel restrained. You have to believe in them, but you also have to understand that there's human nature, and you have to put things in place to prevent the bad behaviors. Terrain. If fighting is sure to result in victory, then you must fight, even though the ruler forbid it. If fighting will not result in victory, then you must not fight, even at the ruler's bidding. So this is where you have to be able to use your own judgment. Sometimes you're going to have to break the rules. That's okay. If the breaking of the rule provides the victory, then you should do it. And if the breaking of the rule has no consequences, then you should do it. Now, there's many nuances to this, but that's essentially what it's getting at. Sometimes a strategist might deploy a strategy out there and expect people to follow it. If a person is out in the arena, on the battlefield, and they've encountered a scenario which they feel that most likely the person who gave the orders, the strategist, couldn't see it, and they have to make a decision, and they know that by making a decision it goes against the orders of the strategist, but however it creates a victory, then they should do it. And the strategist should be able to empower his people or her people to be able to make decisions on their own, if those kind of regards do show up. Regard your soldiers as your children, and they will follow you into the deepest valleys. Look upon them as your own loved sons, and they will stand by you even unto death. So this is important to treat people in your organization like a family. You have to be able to create that in your organization. And you have to have a lot of respect for them and compassion for them, and you have to be really interested in them doing better than you have done. And it's interesting because by having this kind of view where you want them to do their best, it's paradoxical because they might actually leave you, but because you've risen up so much that you care for their well-being, they probably won't leave you because they recognize that you are an inspirational source, a person in their life that actually really cares about them. And that's kind of rare in organizations because a lot of people who run organizations, they don't want people to leave because then they'll put all these systems in place to prevent people from leaving. It's like scarcity thinking. Essentially, they just want to keep people there, and that restrains them, and they don't feel like they're cared for. The people in the organization don't feel like they're cared for, and then what happens is they do end up leaving. It ends up becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. However, the paradox of wanting the best for your people, even more so that if they leave you, you will still be happy for them, grows and builds the organization to such a high level that they can't leave you, and if they do leave you, they'll figure out some partnership with you in which both parties will win. Hence the saying, if you know the enemy and know yourself, your victory will not stand in doubt. If you know heaven and you know earth, you may make your victory complete. This is again about knowing what battles you should fight, studying the components of your enemy, your competitors, etc., and understanding where your strengths and weaknesses are, and focusing, if you're going to battle them, on their weaknesses with your strengths, understanding what your weaknesses are, and they're going to essentially attack your weaknesses with their strengths to put up defensive or deceptive methods to deflect the awareness on your weaknesses and put that awareness on your strengths. So they try to attack you with arrogance on your strengths, but meanwhile you're strong there because you have essentially smoke screened them to go in a different direction. That is all the kind of things that's important to understand prior to getting into battle, prior to going into the environment. Now, a lot of times you can't get all that data, but the objective is to get as much of that data as possible. And if you need to fight a battle, try to put it more in your favor as possible. And that comes as a result by knowing yourself, your strengths, your weaknesses, your people, and so forth, that go to battle with you, and that same of the opponent. The 9 situations. Throw your soldiers into positions where there is no escape, and they will prefer death to flight. If they face death, there's nothing they may not achieve. Officers and men alike will put forth their utmost strength. This is called the death ground strategy, and the death ground strategy is something we can actually do for ourselves. We can take ourselves from the comfort and luxury of escaping out of the battle and actually place ourselves where we have to make out victorious. We have to be victorious or we end up perishing. Now, you can do this through accountability. One of the things that I like to do is if I don't complete my list of tasks in my business, for example, by the end of the day that have been outlined at the start of the day, then I have to donate a certain amount of money to somebody. A lot of different things that you can do that essentially causes you to feel the burn if you don't, if you're not able to achieve the outcome, and thus it'll motivate you and force you to do it. And you can be very creative with this, but we have to have something like that if we find ourselves constantly not hitting our objective. Prohibit the taking of omens, and do away with superstitious doubts. Then, until death itself comes, no calamity need be feared. So one of the things that I like to do is avoid any type of superstitious doubts. If something is superstitious and it's going to help me think more empowered and it's going to move me forward, then I'm going to accept it. But if something says that I can't do what my grand strategy or my purpose in life is to be, I'm not going to believe it. And the reason why I'm not going to do that is because it distorts the mind. It's essentially a weakness. When your brain is injected or infiltrated with a doubt or an idea that you can't achieve the outcome that you want by somebody else or the environment, then what will happen is that you're going to look for ways to not get the outcome that you want. So it's good to make sure that you only internalize the concepts that ensure you victory while being aware of the things that can hold you back or that can stand in your way, but not becoming doubtful of yourself as a result of them. Next, by altering his arrangements and changing